Hello and welcome everyone to Birthing New Earth, where courageous individuals are stepping up to ask hard questions, look at tough decisions, and make responsible choices that are necessary to leave a sustainable living legacy of thriving life on this planet for the next 7 generations and beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Forrest, and I'm founder of Celestial Forest Institute. Today, we are delightfully here with Alexandra Pope and Sjanie Hugo Wurlitzer. Alexandra and Sjanie are co-founders of Red School and the co-authors of the iconic and hugely celebrated book from Hay House, Wild Power, Discover the Magic of the Menstrual Cycle and Awaken the Feminine Path to Power. They're pioneering a new and emerging field of menstruality, creating a new lexicon and approach to women's health and well-being, creativity and leadership, and spiritual life based on the power of our menstruality consciousness. Between them, they bring over 45 years of experience, and today they teach worldwide on the psycho-spiritual process of maturation that unfolds from menarche to menopause and beyond. They're committed to training the menstruality leaders of the future. I'm so excited to hear you speak again. And so excited to have both of you. And today, the title for your talk today is The Menstrual Cycle Awareness, Your Path to Sustainable Living. And I find that very, very interesting. But for those people that are first-time learners of this concept, please speak into what is menstrual cycle awareness. I mean, all of us are aware of it a little bit, I think. We pay attention when we have to. But what you both speak into is such a deeper concept. And since I've started practicing this, I think I'm in my 4th or 5th month now, totally changed my life and has up-leveled the lives of all the women that I've introduced it to that haven't just blown me off and said, I'm gonna do that. And all of them go, I never thought it would have made that much difference, but it makes a huge difference. So please explain to our listeners what it's all about.
Yes. Well, I realize as you asked that question, there are probably a few bridges to cross for women on the path to practicing menstrual cycle awareness. And one of them is just having some awareness of this biological and physical process in our bodies, because for many people, even that basic information is missing. And that's called fertility awareness, tracking the physical changes in your body through the menstrual month so that you know when you're ovulating, you know when your period is due, you have that, what I would call body literacy. So that is a bridge to cross, really, on the path to cycle awareness, and it's really foundational. Our work at Red School picks up on the other side of that bridge, in this kind of new earth place, in this new territory of taking that deeper, and where cycle awareness is not just a practice of tracking the physiological changes, but it's a practice of really deep listening to the energetic, emotional, psychological shifts that happen in your being as you travel, or as you are carried by your cycle month after month after month, and learning the very particular signs and signals for you that indicate and locate you in your cycle at any given time. So it's, in a way, it's about building a whole new relationship with a pattern and rhythm that lives inside you that most of us have ignored and overwritten and mostly made ourselves wrong because we experience, and maybe often don't even realize that that is the experience that is underpinning our experience as a woman. That is the thing, that is the container that we women are living in, and most people don't realize that. So cycle awareness is building this relationship with this pattern and this rhythm that is informing you and guiding you. So firstly, it's that deep listening. And it's then getting to know that pattern in a way that it becomes like a trusty friend that you can count on, except when you can't. We'll get to that in a minute. This trusty friend that you can count on. So when you turn up in a different place or phase of your cycle, you can welcome it. You can welcome the way it shows up, the way you interact with this particular, what we call season of your cycle, and really learn to dance with that particular place in the cycle in a way that is nourishing, that creates wellness, that uplifts you, that supports your evolution as a woman. And then
just come in. I want you to continue, Sjanie, but I just want to add something here, which is, it's really, you're honoring in what Sjanie's saying there, you're honoring the energies of each phase of the cycle, because there are 4 distinct phases, and generally speaking, and you're learning to honor them and respect them, and you're going to find your own particular pattern, repeating pattern, until, of course, it does something tricky sometimes, as Sjanie said. But it is this discovering this lovely inner template, what we call the inner seasons of the cycle, like matching the outer seasons, and learning to live with the changing pattern of energy and mood, rather than expecting yourself to be the same all the time. No one's the same all the time.
Exactly. And when you know that pattern, it's you suddenly know yourself in a whole new way, and you can then begin to organize your life and plan your activities and really sink deeper into the holding of that pattern, knowing what strengths you're likely to feel in different parts of the cycle, knowing what your vulnerabilities or challenges are in other parts of the cycle. So you really get to know that, and then you can work with it. So that's very, very powerful. And then the next sort of part of cycle awareness, which is what I was indicating, was, so, you're building this relationship with a trusty friend, getting to know yourself in this whole new way. And then what tends to happen with the cycle is that it does things that are unpredictable. Just when you thought you could kind of depend on what was going to happen, it goes and, changes. And this is what we would call the sort of the art of cycle awareness, is where we come to really trust that there is a deeper intelligence at work. There is something meaningful at play. And if we can surrender to that unpredictability and that unknown and allow ourselves to be held by it, it has this very magical and beautiful way of leading us into newfound places in ourselves and supporting us to kind of evolve beyond what we've known before. It takes us into the unknown, and then something new is birthed through that, which is, of course, just what your summit is about, Kathy.
Right.
This topic is so juicy.
Right. So, and being someone that has practiced this for a little bit and has lived a long life of not practicing, I can see the differences, and I'm beginning to become aware of that. But you make kind of a bold statement when you say that this is our path to sustainable living. And what do you mean by that? How can women paying attention to their menstrual cycle support sustainable living on the planet?
Yes. Oh, I love that question. Well, the menstrual cycle is, or the cycles are the model of sustainability.
Right.
And what cycles hold, this is in general, cycles hold this pattern of activity and rest. And of course, winter is the great rest time, and we're all now in the at least in the northern hemisphere, in spring right now. And there's this huge expansion of energy and burgeoning of life in nature that we were just talking about before we came on the call, and reaching this peak at summer, at summer solstice, where it's really full on, very charged and alive. And then, of course, the year moves on and we are pulled back into autumn and things start to slow down a bit and we become more internal. And then we drop into winter where everything goes quiescent again. So we've got that on the outside and we've got that built into our bodies, Kathy. So when women are practicing cycle awareness, they are actually when they're honoring their own menstrual cycle, they are practicing sustainable living. So instead of expecting themselves to be permanently in top gear delivering, because no one can do that, by the way, that's just the royal road to burnout. So what your menstrual cycle is, this lovely way of pacing your energy and also pacing your nervous system. So I always love to use Sjanie as my little model for these things, because of course, I don't have a menstrual cycle. I chart with the moon, like you, Kathy. But Sjanie is still happily menstruating away. And I see it every month. It's hilarious. Sjanie is Superwoman on steroids, coming up through, late spring into her summer of the cycle. She could conquer, Everest single-handed and be home in time for tea, to make tea for the children and put them to bed, all in a day's work, nothing. And then, and then I see that lovely moment where Sjanie, she's firing away, and then suddenly, it's like you get punctured, don't you, Sjanie? And it's, just as you're crossing into the inner autumn of your cycle. And I love this because this is everything right about Sjanie, what's going on with Sjanie. There's nothing wrong here. This is just the magnificence of the cycle at work. And she's punctured and she goes, oof. Oh, yes. And because you get on a bit of a high, actually, with that high energy. And she sort of suddenly realizes, oh, I do have limits after all. Yeah. And she actually starts to feel, any menstruating person will have this experience of suddenly feeling like how you're actually feeling, because you can get quite detached from yourself, actually. And the second half of the cycle pulls you in. So
I think that's a very important. I just want to say there, because I'm just thinking sort of in societal terms as well, in terms of the cycle. The height of productivity and kind of active out there energy is very seductive. It's very hedonistic, and it takes us out of ourselves, and we get on a bit of a high. And what happens when that is interrupted in some way, when the kind of status quo is rocked and something abnormal or unusual happens, it brings in this reality check. And that's what happens with the cycle, in the second half, coming out of the inner summer. There is this kind of destabilization, this rocking interruption that happens in our system, which causes us to reality check and go, actually, I'm getting tired now. Actually, I need to slow down a bit. So there is this built-in reminder.
And then you start to become, any person starts to become more aware of their feelings and needs, because when you're in that high activity phase, it's like that all gets deadened and numbed. So, as you slow down, you come back into yourself, you're feeling yourself more. And then, of course, eventually you come back round to the inner winter of the cycle, menstruation, where there's this profound need to stop. And I don't know a woman on this planet who doesn't, when she gets to menstruation, just go, I just want to walk off into the sunset and abandon everything. Right. And that is very healthy and very normal. It's it's absolute necessity for the psyche to have this changing pattern. It's sameness that deadens, exhausts, and ultimately causes destruction, because you become unresponsive to life. And the cycle, with its changing pattern, keeps you responsive to life. So let's take this to the bigger picture. How can individual women with cycles influence and restore something? Very easily, actually. with determination and commitment to their own process, because this is what happens, Kathy. The moment a woman steps onto the path of cycle awareness, as you have discovered, it changes everything, and they start to feel very differently about themselves. There's this natural feeling of wellness that grows, but kindness towards themselves, and this authority that starts to arise, like an inner strength, an inner knowing of things, and a clarity about boundaries, about where you end and someone else begins. So a woman or person practicing cycle awareness is going to influence those people around them. They're going to bring it into their families. I mean, they're bringing it into workplaces. I mean, because we have just tons of people coming through our organization, and, you know, they're desperate, and some of them are doing something about it to see this actually in their workplaces, and not just for them, or, you know, there's a motivation for themselves, but actually because it is a sane way of living that all of us benefit from, particularly our children, who are being totally messed around by this constant sort of being on show and, you know, having to be somebody, produce something, and it's screwing, you know, it's messing with our mental health. But men need it. You know, they're just as bereft deep down inside, because without, if we just keep that one gear going, we do become, all of us, bereft. We lose our sense of who we are, and we lose our connection with nature. And when we lose our connection with nature, we're stuffed on all sorts of levels. On a very practical survival level, we're stuffed, but actually at the level of our souls, we're stuffed, Kathy, because our souls will be just weeping for that loss of the ineffability, of the poetry, of all the kind of magical forces that exist in nature that are so healing and soothing for us, you know.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I think this might be a really good spot to just give our listeners the opportunity to just feel into exactly what you're talking about. And before we started our call, you did a lovely little opening for us that just gave us a taste and let us feel the seasons that you're speaking of. Would you mind doing that for us right now so that all of the listeners can feel what I got to feel?
Yeah. Alexandra, why don't you lead that, and then at the end I will do a little, bring it back to their personal place in the cycle.
Oh,
to
okay.
finish.
I was going to suggest you do it because you do it so beautifully too, but I'll happily do it. And actually that's nice if you do that bit at the end.
And you can name some of the powers of each of those. That'll be lovely.
All right. All right. So let us all close our eyes, and women, men, whatever your gender now, you're all going to be blessed by menstruality, whether you have a menstrual cycle or not. These are archetypal forces, and we are all cyclical beings. If you don't have a menstrual cycle, you have a circadian rhythm. We all have a circadian rhythm, but we have the seasons of the year, and just this, we're held within cycles, within cycles, within cycles. All right, but we are going to call up now the great archetypal menstrual cycle as our vessel. So with our eyes closed, let's just take a moment first to soften and soothe and drop into ourselves. Almost like feeling ourselves coming to land on the earth. And we're sitting in a wonderful grand circle. And outside of us, holding us all, is what we call the great archetypal cycle. So let us imagine this great cycle holding us all. And we can think of it as the menstrual cycle, and we can think of it as the seasons of the year cycle holding us. It's almost like we can lean back into it, feel the integrity of this being that governs our lives and keeps us connected to life. And I want us to notice that there are two poles to this great cycle. There's the pole of menstruation and the pole of ovulation. And we can think of that as the winter solstice at menstruation and summer solstice at ovulation, if we're working with the seasons of the year. And I'm going to invite us all now to turn and face the inner winter, the winter of the cycle, the inner winter of the menstrual cycle, the time of menstruation. And I want to call up all the powers of the inner winter, the powers of rest, stillness, restoration, union, belonging, visioning. And give thanks for all those powers to be the bedrock of our lives. So thank you to all the powers of the inner winter. And now let's turn to the inner spring of the cycle, the time of pre-ovulation. And we give thanks for these powers are so beautiful. We give thanks for the power of new life, possibility, hope, new vitality, play, and motivation. Thank you for all the powers, the many, many powers of the inner spring that carry us back out into the world again, freshly minted. So thank you for the spring powers. And now we turn and face the inner summer, the time of ovulation. And here we give thanks for all those magnificent powers that help us to show up in the world as ourselves, full of bright light, full of desire to connect and to the powers of embodiment in the material world, the power to just go out there and achieve what you want to achieve. That enormous enthusiasm and vitality for making real in the world who you are. And those powers of sensuality and beauty. Thank you. We give thanks for all the powers of the inner summer. And then we turn to the inner autumn, the premenstrual time. And we give thanks for all your powers, inner autumn. Your powers to pull us deeply into the roots of who we are, into our instinctual knowing, into our authority and capacity to speak truth to power, our powers of sight and insight and inner knowing, the power of discernment and boundary. Thank you. Thank you for all the powers of the inner autumn.
And as you let yourself feel the holding of this cycle, just taking a moment now to come back into yourself and to locate the particular place in this archetypal cycle that you are occupying or traversing today. So this is a really core part of the practice of cycle awareness, is doing what we call a cycle check-in. which I'm going to guide you through right now. So whether you have a menstrual cycle or whether you are following the moon cycle, just clocking what day of the cycle you're on. So day 1 is the first day of bleeding. And the moon cycle, well, here today on the 25th of May, it's the 4th day of the moon. You may or may not know what day you're on, but it's good to note that if you know. And then the next piece is to just feel into your own inner atmosphere. What is your weather like today? What's the weather of your internal experience today? The nature of your mind, the landscape of your heart. What is the quality of your energy, your vitality today? Is it waning or waxing? Steady or dispersed? Anything in between. So you're just going through yourself, feeling into what you're experiencing today. And then allowing a little distillation to form, allowing your experience to distill itself into either an image or a symbol, or perhaps a word or two that captures the kind of dominant theme, mood, tone of your day today. And recognizing that whatever you're feeling or experiencing, it has its place. It has its place in this cycle. It is held within this magnificent, organic, wild intelligence. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Feel free to let your eyes open whenever you're ready. And I would normally instruct you to write down your cycle check-in somewhere. And to do that every day is a really good little daily practice. Yeah.
Beautiful. That was just yummy. And I really feel like that gave everyone the opportunity to feel what that container feels like. And for those of us, and Sjanie, I'm just like you, I will get on the horse and ride as far as it will take me. And, smack it a couple of times just to make it go a little faster.
Of course.
But I can totally relate and totally needed, especially in menopausal years. You can just keep going, which brings me to my next question, because I feel like there's a huge message for all of us with all we've been experiencing with the pandemic. So, and I totally value both of your wisdom and experience. Do you have any thoughts on what you think Earth is trying to tell us throughout this pandemic?
I do. I have some thoughts.
See that, Sjanie? Who would have thought it?
Right?
Well, Kathy, my response to you is going to come from really what I have learned from the cycle, what I've come to understand about the cycle, and in particular, symptoms in the cycle. The one thing we know about the symptoms that show up in the cycle is the symptom itself is not the problem. The symptom is always it's a signal and a call to really, I would say, kind of pass through a new gateway to tap into a power or a capacity that we haven't lived into before. Symptoms tend to lead us deeper into ourselves in a way that helps us to unearth a part of ourselves or a capacity within ourselves that we haven't been able to embody or express. So that is certainly true with the cycle and the kinds of things that show up for people in the menstrual cycle, in all phases and places of the menstrual cycle. And so I can't help but feel, the sort of symptom that's going on at the moment in the world is just that. It is an interruption of the status quo that is causing us all to come deeper inside and to really go into the unknown. And what the unknown does is it's a gateway. The unknown is a gateway to evolution. So we've sort of been forced into the unknown, haven't we? In
Absolutely.
a big way.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Alexandra?
Well, I actually, what you've articulated is beautiful, Sjanie, and you've sort of created, well, what you've just finished with there is a sort of another point I'd like to unfold. It's perfect. This thing of we've been thrown into the unknown, and the unknown always feels like disaster or the end of the world. Well, it's death, just because it's the end of something. And death never feels great. There's no light, there's no hope, and it looks like everything is collapsing, and it is. But that is the initial impact of the unknown. And it's like we're in shock, and shock just kind of shuts everything down in us. All the vital signs, if you like, freeze. And so we lose our capacity momentarily to know things, because we're in a new territory now, and we just don't know how to deal with this new territory, and so the system goes into shock. But as you have a sort of tiny mini version of this every month, just before menstruation, you go into this sort of void moment, which is what we're in right now, this unknown moment. But if you have sufficient mindfulness and presence, and you trust cyclical life, I mean, Sjanie and I are, have experienced fear and everything that everyone else has gone through at this event. But at the same time, we've got this really amazing trust in cyclical life, and there is something else sort of kicks in for me, which is, oh yeah, okay, we've just stepped into the unknown. The initial feeling is it's death, it's over, it's horrible, yikes. But my instruction to myself is hold the tension, just be with the unknown, because I'm actually courting something very big. It's like we're stepping into a more expanded consciousness, Kathy. It's like the veils have parted, and I've got to now stabilize myself sufficiently to be able to listen into what is now wanting to emerge. So it's stepping out of my own way, because we can't solve this from our normal everyday consciousness we've had. That has had to be interrupted. It's like that black swan event that disturbs everything. That's what this pandemic is. And our usual ways of thinking just don't cut it now. And so as we drop into the unknown, we have to imagine the unknown is a living presence. I mean, we can use spiritual terms here, Kathy. I mean, it's like we've stepped into a sort of larger consciousness. We've all got our own languaging for that. And that if we can trust pacing and being with this unknown territory, I just love the unknown. It's just so freaking amazing if you've got the nerve. And sometimes I lose my nerve. But what happens is that you start to notice and feel new possibilities emerging. It's like new creative ideas come up, and loads of people have gotten so freaking creative in this pandemic. Right. Even as we've had so much trauma and fear, there has been so much originality, creativity, loosening up of dynamics, loosening up of relationships, loosening up of how we do things. You know, family life has been completely reordered. Parents are spending all this time with their children. Oh my God. Sjanie is one of those parents. How my heart goes out to them.
I too.
Oh, you too. Oh my God, Kathy. Oh my God.
I don't have kids at home, but my heart goes out to the ones that still do.
Yeah. But yes, the unknown is at first feels like the great emptiness, but is behind that is the great fullness, is the new life, the new possibility. And this is evolution at work now, because this is not us having to figure it out. This is us suddenly going, oh my God, oh yes, like something comes to us. We get sort of ideas, downloads, visions, and new possibilities, and new creative ways of doing things. It's incredibly exciting, and I do not want for 1 minute to diminish the fallout of the suffering that has occurred, not least of which is the huge number of deaths and the traumas that has caused within families and, you know, across the world. And, you know, the loss of income for people and all sorts of challenges that have really awful things that have occurred because of it. And besides that is this other deeper story now. And it behoves us all, if we can hold our nerve and not try to rush back to the old story, Kathy, but actually allow what is wanting to come through, the new emergent forces, basically, the new evolutionary forces that are working us.
Wow. Yeah. That feels definitely what I've been feeling. And part of the reason for this summit, because I feel like it's a call for all of us to begin thinking out of the box, becoming more creative, finding the things and the new habits that are going to support us as we evolve. Do you have, either of you, have any insight into what those might look like for, you know, and I obviously the most obvious one would be women observing menstrual cycle awareness, but what is like next step once they get to that point? How does that begin to outpicture in more sustainable ways for the rest, you know, for all of us globally? Or have you even gotten there yet?
I'm having thoughts as they're very rudimentary, but I bet Sjanie, do you have things to say here?
I do have thoughts popping, and I'm just trying to catch them. So, so you're asking really if we have any insight into sort of what the next steps are for us to, So, I mean, my answer is menstrual cycle awareness, but I'll say a little bit more, which is there is an evolutionary impulse that is, you know, bigger than all of us, that is playing out, which we could call the kind of the evolutionary impulse of human consciousness as well. And I feel that for us to really stay close to that and to ride that wave, we need to be plugged into that within ourselves individually. And my sense is that this is as personal as it is the global, as it is sort of universal, but really it starts with us. So how can each one of us stay close to our own emerging process, which is, you know, where menstrual cycle awareness comes into it. If each of us is practicing cycle awareness connects you to that evolutionary impulse in yourself, and connects you to your calling and your particular part to play. And I feel like if we're plugged into that, I mean, postmenopausally, you've got that going on anyway. But for us who are still cycling, if you're connected to that, you're really going to be playing your part in what's unfolding, is my feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts, Alexandra? It's a good question.
Well, yeah, it's a fabulous question. And in a way, it certainly, it follows on again from what you have said. And I feel that with any disruption, I think we're called to be bolder. And it's like, this is a wake-up call. And that there are a myriad ways that we can all wake up to our responsibility for the earth. We have now discovered we are profoundly interconnected.
Right.
And that, creating silos and bunkering in is absolutely not the answer. And with any kind of disruption, there's a kind of possibility for evolution, as we've said. And the one big piece of evolution for me is the expansion of the feminine in the world, the power of the restoration of the power of the feminine. And my hope is, and particularly, of course, through menstrual cycle awareness, is that women, because menstrual cycle awareness is really a channel for restoring the feminine in the world, and that if more women really pick this up, they are just organically, naturally, in a sense, restoring this force in the world. But more personally to them, menstrual cycle awareness builds your authority. And I just want people to trust their own authority, to step out, and imagine that, yes, you can make a difference through who you are. There's no white horse, no knight on a white horse coming to save us, folks. You got that? We're all the knights on white horses.
You're talking about leadership, really, which I
think
it
is leadership.
Yeah. And that's it. We're all discovering that we all are responsible, and we all have a part to play, and to pick up that mantle of our own self-leadership to
we'll be all guided in all sorts of different ways. You don't you listen to this and think, no, I'm not interested in cycle awareness. You don't have to be interested in cycle awareness. It's not your thing. You don't, but you are going to be called in some way, and you'll know it, and you'll go, that's not on. I'm going to do something about that. It's just so small, the things sometimes, but those small things are so powerful. I just can't emphasize enough. Yeah.
And Kathy, coming back to your question, one of the things about we're in a void in our societies at the moment, with this huge unknownness and this kind of enforced pause. And one of the things that happens, in our cycle, when we bleed, when we go into this empty space, is we get clarity on the purpose of our lives. We get connected and plugged into meaning. We talk about this as being where you plug into your wild power, your calling at menstruation. And so I really do feel that there is an opportunity for all of us, menstruating or not, otherwise or not, in this empty space, to really use that as a way to hold the empty space, to allow that meaning and purpose to arise. And that will give you your own particular line of leadership. It will really bring you into alignment with what your part is to play going forward. I think that's really a good thing to name.
I love the way, giving this all the container of being in that empty space, and all of us, if we're women, understand what that is just from our own cycle. And so, if you think about it, this is the first time as humans that any of us have ever experienced a pause for the whole planet. It was literally orchestrated. And I tell women here all the time, it took all of us being afraid of death, or afraid of the death of our loved ones, to get us to stop. But she stopped us. She got us all in the winter for just a moment.
I know. With the world, we've been joking that the world is having a big bleed right now.
Right. That's exactly what it is. So, yeah, we can all have a good time with that one. But so your free gift for everyone is the ebook, Menstrual Cycle Awareness, that gets everyone started. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience about how they can become more aware, how they can do their part, what it is they can do for themselves and for the planet? Because when they're doing it for themselves, they're doing it for the planet.
Do you know, I think it's really what Sjanie just said then about, this dropping into meaning and purpose. I just feel so much of the suffering and violence that exists on the planet is because people have no idea. They're just not rooted in, they're not supported, they haven't had the education or even the nourishment, the physical nourishment or anything to connect into their own nature and what it is they're really good at, what they love to do, because we've all got a particular gift or something. And when you touch that, oh my God, it's the sweetest, most beautiful thing of all. What I talk about it as one's creative expression. I'm not talking about being an artist here, but whatever it is that kind of floats your boat and that you are supported in being able to do that, I tell you, violence would collapse overnight.
Right? Absolutely.
People know that. And of course, the menstrual cycle is the most exquisite way of being able to discover what you're about, what your nature is, and connecting into meaning and purpose. And that all happens at menstruation.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to follow that by saying, so the ebook will support you to really learn the details of how to practice cycle awareness. And then, to take that a step further, what Alexandra said, for you to have your own felt experience of having that meaning and love and purpose fill you and touch you, which is what happens at menstruation. It really is about creating a pause, a retreat, some kind of time and space for yourself to really drop and let go at menstruation. So that is the piece I just want to encourage, really. We know it's difficult because it's so culturally, there's so much confusion and cultural, and shame and pressure, all kinds of things that make it difficult. However, when you hear us saying that this really matters, you having time to stop at menstruation will change the course of your life and will change the future on this planet. It really, really matters. Give it a go, just take some time out. Find a way to work your life so you can have some time alone to rest and drop and let go, and then see what you receive when you do that.
Yes. Yes.
I would probably just encourage people to read our book Wild Power, because it really describes in detail how to support all the different powers of the cycle, but it goes into great detail on what happens at menstruation and also how to live your cycle in a non-cyclical world.
We address all that.
We address all that. We're real pragmatists here, and so it would be a lovely support, if people wanting to go deeper after they've read the Cycle Awareness ebook.
Perfect. Well, and we'll put the link to that so that they can get the book if they're interested in that. Ladies, this has been delightful and insightful, and I'm so appreciative that you all decided to share your wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
Kathy, thank you very much indeed. I tell you, we love talking to you.
It's such a pleasure. Honestly,
really,
such a pleasure.
It's that's just something that works for us there with your energy. It's so lovely.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I know that all of our listeners are going to appreciate all the wisdom that you've shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.